have it your way. Okay, I'll start over. Welcome to our weekly national news conference. I'm Sandy Close, Director of Ethnic Media Services. Today, our focus is on the future of the Republican Party as seen by three newly elected GOP members, all from California, an overwhelmingly blue state where most African American, Latino, and AAPI likely voters are Democrats, according to the Public Policy Institute. Some political observers and even former Republican elected officials believe the Republican Party has lost touch with diverse metropolitan areas. Our speakers today will share their views about the GOP's future and why they believe it offers the best representation for ethnic Americans. We welcome US Representative Young Kim of California's 39th District, which includes parts of Los Angeles, Orange County, and San Bernardino. California State Assemblywoman Suzette Martinez Valladares, representing the 38th District, which includes Eastern Los Angeles and Orange counties, and City Council member Walter Allen III of the city of Covina in Los Angeles County. Thank you all three very much for joining us today. We ask you to speak slowly for our interpreters in Spanish, Korean, and Mandarin. If you speak too fast, they won't be able to keep up, and we may have to interrupt to ask you to slow down. We invite reporters to enter questions in the chat box. We invite speakers to look at the chat box and answer questions informally on your own, but we will take up those questions after each of your presentations. And we will send a video of today's briefing, expanded biographies of each of our speakers, and relevant collateral this afternoon. Next week, we will have no Friday briefing in honor of the July 4th holiday. We will, however, host a special briefing especially for ethnic media in Texas on Thursday, June 30th, looking at the battle over redistricting in Harris County. Wednesday. On Friday, July 16th, we will host the first of a series of news briefings with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on vaccinations. And this is an historic breakthrough, I think, for us and for the CDC with our sector. Now I'm turning the conference over to our moderator, journalist, author, and co-coordinator of these conference calls, Pilar Marrero.
Thank you, Sandy. Welcome everyone to this Friday briefing. Just a little point. Assemblywoman Valladares is from Santa Clarita area, and that's in northern Los Angeles County. So it's always hard to get those districts right. I want to welcome the representatives. This is an important moment to have a conversation with ethnic media from you. You might get some hard questions. I'm sure you'll be able to answer them. First, let's go to Congresswoman Young Kim of California's 39th District. Congresswoman, it's an honor to have you with us.
Sure. And Sandy, thank you so much for your welcoming remarks. And Maria, thank you so much for the introduction. And per your instructions, Sandy, I will try to speak slowly so that the interpreters will have the opportunity to translate. I understand it's going on in the background simultaneously. So thank you so much for having me. I'm a representative for 39th Congressional District. And this is the congressional district that represents Los Angeles, Orange, and San Bernardino counties. This is one of the most diverse districts in the nation, and I'm proud to represent this very vibrant and diverse community that reflects what America should look like. And the fact that someone like me, an immigrant from South Korea, can serve and walk the halls of Congress and be one of the few member of Asian American community serving this great nation. I think it really shows that the American dream is real and it's very much alive. So this is the district I'm proud to serve because this is where I raised my children, 4 of them. And this is where I started my career in public office, working, starting from former Senator Ed Royce, who went on to become the congressman. So I've served with him the same district, same community, same region for over 2 decades. And now I am representing that very district in my own capacity as an elected member for the district. So as one of the first Korean American women to ever serve in Congress and as a Republican, I believe that the Republican Party to me is not the grand old party, but grand opportunity party. It works on policies that empower all Americans to achieve their American dream like I did. And that's exactly why I ran for Congress, to get through the gridlock and create common sense policies that help Americans succeed. And I think the fact that this freshman Republican class in Congress has so many women, many from minority communities, and many of us are veterans, it really shows that the future of the Republican Party is bright. So for the Republican Party to reach new voters, I truly believe, and I've always talked about how we need to show up and share our message that Asian Americans are not automatically considered to be a member of the Democratic Party. We have our voices, we have our shared values, we have our conservative views. I think that is really important, but that is something that we have an obligation to show up and network with our very rich ethnic communities. And I think that's where Assemblywoman Suzette Martinez and Councilman Walter, we also have that obligation to share that common goal. As communities across the country see faces that look like them and hear from new voices that sound like them, women voices, minority voices, immigrant voices, these are showing when you get big government policies out of the way and we work on lowering taxes, cutting regulations and red tape, create pro-growth policies that allow for meaningful job opportunities. I think this is how we will see Republicans continue to make an impact in our communities. Look, 11 of the 15 House seats that flipped from Democrat to Republican last year were won by women, myself included. This is the future of the party that I see, and I'm helping and working to grow even bigger. So in Congress, I'm currently working hard to get things done and deliver results for my community. And I've already shown that without compromising my conservative principles, when you work to find common ground, work across the aisle, you can get things done. And I was recently ranked the most bipartisan freshman in Congress. And this distinction comes in less than 6 months I've been in office. And that really shows that when you work across the aisle, you can get things done. And that's been my motto here. If you don't care who takes the credit, you can get a lot of things done. So I've already had 5 of my bills pass the House, and 1 has already become a law. And that's the Bipartisan Paycheck Protection Program Extension Act that simply gave small businesses owners 2 more months, more time to access the unspent Paycheck Protection Program funds to help keep their doors open and keep their employees on payroll. Believe it or not, this 2-month extension allowed 2.7 million small businesses to receive $54 billion. And that additional help would not have been made possible if we didn't have this PPP extension legislation. So I'm very proud to be able to bring that tangible result for my district and for small businesses across the country. So as we create policies, we cannot forget that these are taxpayer dollars. It's not monopoly money. We've seen Democrats in Congress continue to rush through partisan bills that cost trillions of dollars and do not allow for even the chance for bipartisan input. So instead of throwing money at solutions in search of a problem, I've always spoken out and say, let's instead put money where it can make a difference for American workers and families. So repeatedly spending trillions of dollars will drive up our national debt and ultimately result in more money out of the wallets of taxpayers. And we saw this with the COVID-19 bill that cost $1.9 trillion with only 9% of funds going towards the combating COVID-19. Now, while we still have unspent COVID-19 funding, some of which is being redirected to other purposes, such as caring for migrants that are in US communities, Democrats want to spend additional $6 trillion partisan infrastructure bill through the reconciliation process, even though a deal on a bipartisan targeted approach has been reached by Congress and the White House. And I serve on the Problem Solvers Caucus, and we have come up with the proposal that would be about $1.25 trillion. And this is a bipartisan proposal, a framework that we rolled out. And I know you probably saw the news this morning. The president and the White House and the senators have come to this agreement, and we look forward to see the final version coming through. And I look forward to seeing that. So all this to say, a targeted infrastructure approach is the way to meet the community's needs and create jobs. I'm a ranking member of the Small Business Committee on Innovation, Entrepreneurship, and Workforce Development. And I'm also a former small business owner myself. So I'm using my experience to, finding common sense solutions. And I'm committed to creating opportunities for Californians and growing our workforce. So I say a targeted bill will accomplish those goals without raising taxes. And I've been clear from the very beginning of my term that I want to work in a bipartisan way. So I joined several of my freshman colleagues to write to President Biden at the start of this term, expressing our desire to work in a bipartisan way and get things done. And unfortunately, though, it appears that Democrats instead are taking a my way or the highway approach. And I don't think it needs to be that way. We have a lot of issues that we can work on in a bipartisan way, and I'll continue to do my part to use that philosophy to create pro-growth policies that expand job opportunities and strengthen our economy and boost our national security. And as we recover from COVID-19 pandemic, I think the policies we work on in Congress will play a large role in dictating our future. And by getting big government out of the way and making life more affordable for workers and families, I think we can get our economy and our life back on track. So with that, I'll stop and take a few questions. And I know we have two other wonderful legislators that I'm sure you are dying to hear from.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Congresswoman. We do have several questions already in the chat. This is exciting. So I'm going to invite Henrietta Burrows. Henrietta, please ask your question and tell the Congresswoman what media you are from.
So much, Pilar. Congresswoman Kim, I'm from the East Palo Alto Today newspaper. And I noticed that you were saying that you support cutting government regulations, and I find that that's a position that most Republicans advocate, but it's the government regulations that protect the public and the environment. So would you agree that there are government regulations that should stay in place?
So not all government regulations are bad ones, as you mentioned. Some regulations are important, but in terms of helping to grow our economy, at this point, when our country is already faced with trillions of dollars in national debt, and recent report, according to the, I think there is a organization that looks at the federal budget, they say we are spending more in interest payments. So at this rate, we're already spending $300 billion in paying interest on national debt. So, increasing more trillions of dollars and adding to the national debt is not the way to do it. So things like that. So those are where I will put a line. But in some cases, there are some good regulations, and I believe that will help. So when I talk about cutting regulations, I say in terms of economic, fiscal, being more fiscally responsible. So hopefully there is that clarity there.
Thank you so much. Julia Dudley. Julia.
Sorry, I was waiting to be unmuted. First
Yes.
of all, I'd like to thank Congresswoman Kim for coming to the ethnic media to give us a better insight. Coming from an independence perspective, I worry about the constant rhetoric that runs through our national media on both sides. What we hear Republicans doing and saying, and what we hear Democrats doing and saying. And I feel like the messaging is getting lost in minority communities who need the assistance and help, small business owners who need the assistance and help, and people who need jobs. And frankly, because of the constant fighting between both sides, how will the Republican Party get out of that and begin to reach out to minority communities throughout the nation? Thank you in advance.
So as I mentioned in my opening remarks, it is really critically important that the legislators take the opportunity and take the initiative to get out into the minority communities, ethnic groups, and showing up. Half of the battle is won when we are together in a room and really understand one another when we're talking to each other, understanding with the respect. So for example, during the last year, as we were trying to get over the COVID-19 and fighting the pandemic together, there have been unfair bias and target against Asian Americans. And when we don't speak out and say we are same, I mean, how many times that, in my first couple months in office, I never thought that I would be asked to come before the House Judiciary Committee and testify and say Asian Americans are Americans and that Asian American issues are American issues too. And so there have unfortunately been no voices to speak out on behalf of the conservative side, the Republican side. Now that I'm serving as one of the very few, I'm only one of the 2 Korean American Republican women serving in Congress. And we're adding our voices, the immigrant voices, the unique perspectives as mother of 4, as a former small business owner, as someone who has lived through this, the communities that is very diverse. I think that showing up is half of the battle, Julia, as you asked, how can we get over this misperception and misunderstanding that, that exists. But I think when we come together and start treating each other with respect, I think that is going to be where we're going to win half of the battle there. We just have to do more of it.
Thank you so much,
Julia.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Araceli, do you want to ask your question? Araceli Martinez from La Opinión here in LA.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, Pilar. Thank you, Congress, for the opportunity. I would like, I'm Araceli Martinez with La Opinión, a daily newspaper in Los Angeles. I would like to know your position about the immigration bills in Washington, and what do you think about having an immigration reform for undocumented. In California, we had the biggest number of people with no immigration status. I would like to know, what do you think about it? Thank you.
Sure. And that's what, talking about immigration reform that is fair and compassionate, really is one of the legislative priorities I came to Washington to fix. And I think I bring unique immigrant perspective in that. We have millions of DACA recipients living in the United States. And it might be surprising to you to hear from a Republican that I truly believe we need to fix DACA once and for all. We cannot have every 4 years or every 8 years, when we have a different president occupying the White House, we cannot fix immigration, especially the DACA situation, through the executive order. It has to have a long-term congressional solution. So as we talk about immigration reform, I will be adding my voice, but I really would like to see a standalone legislation to fix DACA. They have been here in the United States without the fault of their own. And as you know, this is the same language that we speak. We appreciate the contributions that every single one of them make, including the DACA recipients. And there are now contributing members who are entrepreneurs, they are job creators. And we definitely believe that they need to be helped. We need to work on fixing visa overstays, for example. We need to allow those individuals that have come to the United States as a foreign student to be able to, we invest so much in educating them. And then if we don't fix the immigration system to allow them to stay here and adjust their status, we're going to lose the high quality individuals that could be staying here and then help our country become even a stronger, country in the world. So I think there are many areas that we can focus on, but I am one Republican that says that I will work to, convince my Republican colleagues why there is a benefit of having the immigration fixed, including the DACA solution once and for all. And I'm
Congresswoman, I know time is running out for us. So let me ask one last question, taking some of the questions in the chat. You voted against the commission, establishing the commission to investigate January 6th, the uprising, or whatever you might want to call it. I would like to know what your position on that, the events of that day is, and what's your position about a potential candidacy for Donald Trump in 2024?
I think the last part of your question was, what do I think about Donald Trump?
A potential Donald Trump running again in 2024. And that was in the chat. Somebody's asking this question in the chat.
Well, first of all, let me share my thoughts on January 6th Commission. First of all, January 6th was a dark day in our nation's history. And after the events, I did my constitutional duty and certified the Electoral College. The events of that day exposed major security vulnerabilities under the management of the US Capitol. So I am in agreement of fixing those issues and secure our Capitol, so our Capitol Police, members of Congress, the staff, and anyone that works in the building will be able to do our jobs and feel safe. But the January 6th Commission, that bill also I felt should have allowed for both sides to either jointly appoint the staff, or there should be an equal number of staff appointed by the chairman and vice chairman. But the bill did not have explicit prohibition against indefinitely extending the commission. So I also wanted to point out that there is an ongoing security study by the architect of the Capitol to ensure the complex is not breached again. And there is an ongoing investigation by Department of Justice, FBI, and other government entities that are addressing those who broke the law on January 6th. So I felt that that was unnecessary at the time. We need to let the current pending investigations run its course So that's why I didn't support the January 6th commission. This would be duplicative, and we just did not let the system work itself out. For me, representing a very purple district where Joe Biden won by over 10 percentage points, but the district overwhelmingly sent me to Washington, D.C. because they saw someone who is an independent leader, someone who is working across the aisle. And that's the type of representation they want, and that's the type of representation I would like to see in our president who will be occupying the White House, whether it's 4 years from now or 8 years from now. I'm not going to comment on, which Republican should be running or whether it's the previous president running again. I'm not going to comment on that at this point.
Okay, thank you so much, Congresswoman, for being with us. We really appreciate it. I hope you come back in the future.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Okay, let's go to our next speaker, and that is California State Assemblywoman Suzette Martinez Valladares. As you can hear, she's a Latina, 30th District of California, and that district is out in the northern part of the of LA, northern part of LA County in Santa Clarita. Welcome, Assemblywoman.
Thank you so much for having Maria. And it also includes Ventura County, the city of Simi Valley, which is home to the Reagan Library. So blessed to have that iconic library in my district. Thanks for having me.
Go ahead and give us your introductory remarks.
Yeah, great. So thank you so much for having me. This is an exciting opportunity. I want to talk to you a little bit about my story because I think it's important that you know who I am, why I'm a Republican, the issues important to my community, and the issues that I think California for Republicans can win on in the future that really have to do with balancing the one-party system that currently is California. So I am a Southern California native. I was born in the Northeast San Fernando Valley. My grandparents, my great-grandparents, came to California in 1911 and 1917 from Mexico. They worked in the fields in Kern County. My great-grandparents, my grandmother actually worked along Cesar Chavez. My family stories consist of the long days in the field, of hot weather, really hard working conditions. And my father, well, he grew up in the Northeast San Fernando Valley as well. Every summer, he went back to the Central Valley to work with my great-grandfather in the fields. So appreciated a hard day's work. He never wanted his children to have to work that hard, so instilled in us the need for getting an education. On my mom's side of the family, my mother was first generation American. Her mother was born in Mexico. Her father was born in Puerto Rico. So I'm part Puerto Rican, which made me nervous about you guys telling me to speak slow because Puerto Ricans do not speak slow. I'm really trying. But they also moved, my grandfather served in the military, met my grandmother in a little border town in Naco, Sonora, and made California home because of the booming and growing aerospace industry in the 1950s. I grew up in the Northeast San Fernando Valley. My father never graduated high school, actually, but he built his first engine for a 57 Chevy when he was 15 years old. So worked well with automotives and worked hard to support our family throughout my life. My parents taught me the value of hard work. My dad said that I didn't have to be the smartest person in the room, but if I was the hardest working person in the room, I could be just as successful, if not more, than the hardest working person in the room. My mom actually worked for LAUSD for over 30 years, serving our special needs community, which is partly where my passion for childcare and the special needs community derived from. But really, my mom taught me to give back and to speak up for those who were vulnerable and to give back to our community. My first job, I was 16 years old, and I worked at Six Flags Magic Mountain. I was there, though. It wasn't a simple summer job for me. I was there for 8 years, and they gave this, poor Latina an opportunity to work and learn so much about shift management, about a Fortune 500 company. And I left that organization being a loss prevention investigator, investigating internal theft and asset loss, and I worked on asset protection. I went to our local community college. Actually, I'll back up for a second. In high school, I looked at my community, and whether it was the high school dropout rate, whether it was the fact that out of 10 of my closest girlfriends, 3 of them were pregnant before graduating high school, whether it was drugs or crime in my neighborhood, my family being affiliated with gangs, potholes, or the multitude of issues that stem from living in a scenario where you're experiencing poverty. I looked around me and all of my representatives were Democrats. So I wasn't making the connection that if Democrats, who were supposed to be the party that support minorities and support the poor, were in charge and were in charge for so long, why was I not seeing change in my own community? And it forced me to look at the Republican Party. And in the Republican Party, I found a party that is open and diverse, that respects the individual, but cares about the collective, that supports liberty and freedom, that wants to empower people. So I registered as a Republican at a very young age. I went to our local community college, California State Northridge. I'm a product of our community. I had a niece that was diagnosed as severely developmentally delayed, nonverbal, and on the autism spectrum when I was working for Congressman Buck McKeon. And while I was working for him and loved my job, that experience, watching my niece's intervention, watching her go through an immersion of early childhood and intervention services, changed her life and changed mine, and it catapulted my nonprofit career. So I've served as an executive in the nonprofit realm for well over a decade. And I think that this experience was vital for me as a Republican, was vital for me as now a representative, because it taught me that while I have professional and political ideologies that align with the Republican Party, in the nonprofit world, it had always been and has always been my obligation to identify a community issue, to bring together community stakeholders, to come to a solution, and to execute the plan and the solutions. It taught me that bringing people together, not dividing people, was a way to address our problems. Unfortunately, we do not see that in California or the nation, quite frankly. Partisan divide is at an all-time highest. And the people of California are tired of the partisan politics. The people of California want government that works for them, and that isn't happening. I decided to run for state assembly really for one reason, and her name is Charlotte. She's my daughter, she's 4 years old. And I decided to run for state assembly because I want her to grow up in a California that affords her every opportunity that was afforded to me, from a family who 100 years ago came here to work in the fields, who now has a daughter who is the only Republican Latino in the entire state assembly. But that opportunity has been dwindling for my family and for so many other families in the state of California and our Latino community. My family has moved to Texas, South Dakota, Colorado. I do not want to move, but the policies in California are crushing the middle class and forcing us out of a state, out of a soil that we have reaped so much from, to leave this state because of the economic policies and the lack of economic upward mobility for all Californians because of policies being implemented in Sacramento. As a new legislator, my priorities have been representing, the voice of my community, addressing wildfires, public safety power shutoffs, addressing, lockdown and closures with little to no guidance from an administration that has mismanaged this lockdown, our vaccine rollout, our businesses, at an alarmingly negligent pace. It has been devastating and it is frustrating. And this is the pandemic. These issues, California's brand has been crisis prior to this pandemic. Homelessness, the lack of affordable housing, the high cost of living, taxes. Latino families literally have to drive until they can afford a home. So we have families that live an hour away from work because they cannot afford to buy housing in the community that they work in. So these are the issues that I've been focusing on for my district. But these are also the issues that I think Republicans at this point in time can take with their winning issues that speak to the needs of the Latino community, that speak to the needs of Californians. And I think that Californians are looking for representatives that are going to address the issues that change their lives, that allow them to stay in this state and address some of our most critical issues.
Thank you.
Much time that I have, but
yes, it's better if we just go to a couple of questions now because we have a third speaker. Thank you so much for your passion, Assemblywoman. We appreciate it. So let's see. Jaya has a question. Jaya, do you want me to ask the question? So she says, when you say that the lockdown was mishandled, what would you have done differently?
Yeah, I think that on the ground, it's been amazing to see the resiliency of our community and our businesses who have done their part. People stayed home from work. Businesses closed their doors because government asked them to. But during this past year, even before I was in the state assembly, the administration has had little to no collaboration with the business community, with the legislature, with our public health departments. And there has been little guidance. I introduced a bill early in January, Assembly Bill 420, which is a safe theme park reopening. Because as theme parks, I worked at Six Flags Magic Mountain, had absolutely no guidance for business reopening since the onset of their closure and this pandemic. Why did our administration nearly a year later not provide guidance for so many industries that had been shuttered and closed for over a year? A clear mismanagement. Another clear mismanagement was that of EDD. EDD, 10 years ago during the first recession, the California auditor made recommendations because they knew had we been stuck in this situation again, where an enormous amount of people would need access to their EDD benefits, would not be able to get it had these fixes not been executed. They were not executed. And today we still have 1.2 million Californians that do not have and need their EDD benefits. At the end of the day, it's been the administration's responsibility, nearly a year and a half later, to get that agency under control and delivering benefits to people. And lastly, the vaccine rollout was another debacle. The administration again knew that we would have in November and December vaccines. That rollout should have been planned and executed. People died because of an ineffective rollout, which disproportionately affected the Latino community when it came to access to vaccines as well.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. And let me point out that California has the highest percentage of vaccinations in the country. So let's go to one of the questions in the chat. Okay. The Assemblywoman talked, this is from Hispanic LA. Is this from Gabriel? Gabriel, is that you? The Assemblywoman talks of mismanagement, but how does she explain the consistent popularity of Governor Newsom? And I will add, do you support his recall?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I feel like there is optimism. There is optimism in California because we have been closed for so long, and people are ready to get out, to get into restaurants, to go to theme parks. Six Flags Magic Mountain in my community is probably going to have one of the best years that it's had. They're going to surpass 2019 revenues because people are ready to get out. And I think that as things have opened up, as the governor has went on really a campaign tour, as the governor has continued to hand out money and paint a rosy picture, people are somewhat happy. But what I'm also noticing is as people are coming out of this pandemic, the problems that existed prior are more evident than ever. If you go onto the streets in Los Angeles, And a street that a year and a half ago was clean is now riddled with litter, with tents, with homeless, which is inhumane. I don't know that he can actually sustain his approval rating as things open up and as people realize that the issues that were crisis level before are still crisis level and have only become exponential.
Okay, thank you, Assemblywoman. If you can stay a few minutes and answer some of the questions in the chat, you're welcome to. We would love for you to do that. I want to move on to our third speaker, if you don't mind. And thank you so much for being so available for us.
Thank
All right. Okay, we're welcoming our third speaker now. That's City Council Member Walter Allen III from the city of Covina. The city of Covina is a city located 22 miles east of downtown LA, for those who don't know the area. So welcome to our briefing.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank you for having me. I think there was one little mistake. I'm not a newly elected official. I've been on the city council for 22 years now, going on 23. And I've been a Republican for a number of years. I was a Democrat. I'm from Oakland, California, the eastern part of Oakland, East Oakland. And it's a real pleasure to be here. As a city council member, I'm happy to say that we have nonpartisanship on our city council. We're comprised of Democratic membership and Republican membership. And we actually get along with one another. And I will say this, at the local level, if you don't get along, you don't get anything done. And we've been able to get quite a bit done in the city of Covina. But one of the issues that many of the California cities are having right now is the issue of local control. And one of the primary examples I want to give is what we call arena numbers, which deal with the regional housing needs assessment numbers. I've been on the council when we had redevelopment, and redevelopment was a tool that we were able to force developers to build low and moderate income housing in their projects. When that went away, we lost a major tool, and we've been trying to climb out of the barrel since that time. And now the state legislature, unfortunately, is putting mandated issues on us in terms of the arena numbers. And it's going to be difficult for many of the cities to meet the demand because, of course, the cities don't have the funding and the developers are not held to build low and moderate income housing. So as a result of that fact, that's one of the major dilemmas we have right now. One of the things that I wanted to mention is that I kind of have an unusual background. As a matter of fact, when I ran 22 years ago, when I was initially asked to run, I did not want to run because I didn't consider myself a political person. I was basically a nonpartisan person. And as a result of getting Cokes into running, I've had the opportunity to serve, but the most important thing is all of my background for the last 45 years has been in public safety. And that's one of the concerns I have as an elected official, particularly as a councilman, is it goes back to one of the planks in the Republican Party platform, which is a good one, and that's public safety. I find that people in our communities, particularly in Covina, their major concern is quality of life and public safety. And one of the major concerns I have as a local elected official is exactly that, public safety. And being in law enforcement for all of these years and currently the director of a police academy, one of the major concerns I have, and I know many people have, and it doesn't make any difference whether you're Republican or Democrat, is the notion of defunding the police. And I wanted to just talk about that just for a quick minute. 21st century policing is supposed to be driven by crime data. And for some reason, many people don't pay attention to the data. It is the victims' reports of crime and issues that deal with crime that sends police disproportionately into communities of color. And for some reason, people think that police officers, and like I said, I've been around for a long time in the profession, really run around making it their point to target Blacks or Latinos, and that's simply not the case. I live this profession, I'm living it now, training young recruits from several different departments in LA County. They send them to us each year. We train these officers. The majority of the officers we're training at the academy that I supervise are minority. 80% of the class is minority. And it's always been my point as a director to try to send people of color into communities of color in an effort to shore up community policing efforts. So I just want to raise the point that please ask everybody to look at the crime data that generates response by police officers. And we know that the George Floyd incident was a horrible thing. I don't know of any police officer that wasn't sickened by that. But understand this, each year, approximately 375 million police contacts with citizens and criminals every year. And of that, probably about, well, for the last 5 years, about 1,000 individuals are shot by the police. It just so happens last year, I think the number of Black individuals that were shot by the police was somewhere around 235. Most of them were armed and dangerous. Unfortunately, from my perspective, being in the profession and being in the city, being on a city council, the way it is portrayed is that police officers are shooting a Black man every day of the year, and that's just not happening in terms of killing a Black man every year who is unarmed. And that's simply not the case. Of the 1,000 that got shot last year, like I said, 235 were Black, and most of those individuals were armed and dangerous. Additionally, I think it's important to know that according to the CDC, Blacks make up between the ages of 10 and 43 make up the fact that about 13 times the rate of whites get shot by Blacks. So it's really created a real problem in terms of not getting the data out there. And then, of course, is there a need for police reform? There's always room for improvement. And one of the things that we're doing in California, and I will say California is really progressive when it comes to police training. Looking at the use of force and really honing in on de-escalation techniques. Also, really re-engaging communities in terms of police and community relations. And just overall looking at some of the aspects that were actually publicized in the Obama's 21st century policing efforts. I mean, all of us are looking at that to try to make efforts to demonstrate to the public that there is legitimacy in law enforcement, particularly in police work. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I mean, you're probably looking at city issues, but I felt it was important since I've been in the profession all of these years to really just for a moment talk about public safety and the fact that defunding the police is not the solution, because the people that are being harmed when you talk about defunding the police are people of color.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you so much for expressing your views. And yes, we want to know what you think about public safety for sure. I'm going to invite Carl Johnson. Carl Johnson, to ask your question or make your comment. Carl, and identify what media are you from.
This is Carl with Poly by Design. Thank you, Councilman Allen, for your time. I was curious how you saw government's role, or how you see government's role in development of small business in Covina. Would it be reduce over-regulation, support through finance, or crime reduction? So, like, how do you, as a councilman, prioritize government's role in growing small business?
Well, it's been a government's role, particularly during the pandemic, as I thought in LA County was a little overreaching. We tried to have a balance of taking care of our citizens by actually setting up vaccination clinics, but at the same time, we had tremendous restrictions on outside dining and some of the other things that occurred that made it difficult. We lost a number of businesses during the pandemic because people just couldn't do business because of the real stringent requirements in Los Angeles County and the state of California. But all three issues that you mentioned are important. We would like to, what little money we got from the feds, we used a lot of those dollars to offer grants to the businesses that were struggling. And that was one aspect. We could use additional funding from the federal government to help those small businesses. They are the lifeblood of our city because we don't have any major employees, with the exception of Intercommunity Hospital, which is the largest employer in Covina. We have quite a few small businesses, and they're struggling as we speak, and additional dollars would help us greatly.
Thank you. Eugene Levin, can you ask your question, please? Eugene?
Thank you very much for your service, and especially with law enforcement. What's your position regarding decision of LA County Supervisor to close Central Jail and taking consideration?
Well, this all morphs into two issues. The jail, which I think is a ludicrous thing to do, because right now we have an LA district attorney that believes that basically no one should be incarcerated. And so we have an upsurge in crime, a violent crime in Los Angeles County. In addition to that, recently, the city of Covina and a number of cities have given George Gascon a vote of no confidence. And one of the main reasons, he refuses to file cases. We have repetitive criminals that are wreaking havoc on our cities. And they're repeating the offenses over and over again, and he's not prosecuting them. So I guess he's contributing to the fact that maybe he feels that we don't need a jail facility. But I think it's a ludicrous notion to not have a place to incarcerate criminals, particularly repetitive criminals that disrupt the quality of life in our communities and also harm our citizens in our cities. And any elected official, their number one concern should be preserving life, preserving property, and preserving the quality of life in a community.
Thank you. Vansh Gupta, can you ask your question?
All right. Let me get the question over here. So Councilman Allen, thank you very much for being part of this briefing. My question to you would be on the point of police violence and the rhetoric we have that, police officers they shoot people and they're very, there's police brutality all over the country. What can we do to change that rhetoric? Can police officers, come out and say that, we are not racist and we're trying to help? Is there a way to remove that fear factor? What can we do? Because clearly this is a problem, right? How do
Yeah,
you
I
fix that?
think law enforcement has never been geared for public relations, and we don't have a big public relations budget. But I can tell you, I've invited the media to come to Rio Hondo Police Academy, and I'll show them around, and I'll show them what kind of training we do. California is so far ahead with the Post Commission, the training that all of the academies have to provide. And one of those areas of concern is de-escalation and also cultural diversity. We have a lot of hours of cultural diversity here at our academy. We even send our recruits as a mandatory requirement, they have to go to the Museum of Tolerance for a day of cultural diversity training. And that's only a minute part of what they're going to receive. Mental health, knowing and learning how to deal with the mental health population, the homeless population. It would be helpful. We could use all the media help we could get to really broadcast what we're actually doing in law enforcement, particularly here in California. People would be very surprised if they heard the true stats, the crime data, and why we go to disproportionately into the minority communities, because that's where a lot of the black on black crime is being committed. That's driving us into the community so we can help protect our citizens. So the more you can help us get the information out there, I welcome anybody to work with us.
Khalil Abdullah, Khalil, please ask your question. Khalil Abdullah.
Hello, council member.
Hello, Khalil.
I appreciate your service. I'm from DC, so I'm on the other side of the country. And it sounds like a lot of the reforms you're talking about in terms of California training and sensitivity. Obviously, there are things that are going on that the public doesn't see. But I'm picking off a point of another questioner, and that is like stop and frisk policies, particularly in New York, I think under Bratton and Giuliani and et cetera, and that era. And so it goes to my larger question, which is, there are policies that tend to bring police officers in conflict with the community. And I'm speaking specifically to, say, marijuana busts. We don't see the same deployment of police officers putting people up against the wall, shaking them down, shaking their pockets, stopping their cars in Anglo communities. I'm going to be hard pressed for you to convince me that the same effort to disrupt marijuana, if it remains illegal, and I'm not arguing whether it should be legal or illegal, I'm just saying in the deployment of resources, at least I don't see it in the communities I've been, where police officers are rolling up into the suburbs of Washington, D.C., well-heeled, predominantly Anglo communities with the same, use of force, inevitably contact with individuals for what many people consider low-level crimes. So I kind of would like to hear, I'm not in a fixed position on this. I'm just saying from observation. I'm not a young guy either. I just have a tad more hair than you do. But I haven't seen it in my life where there's an equal deployment of police officers in these communities.
I can't speak. I can speak from the experience I had in Oakland, which when I was growing up there. And as you know, Oakland has lots of crime, even more so now than it did. I think that police officers, in order to deal with the gun violence, which is not based upon gun sales, is based upon criminals having guns, there's certain tactics that need to be deployed to keep the community safe. Otherwise, you continue to have many, and particularly in the Black community, Black deaths at the hands of Blacks. And from my perspective, and like I said, I've been in the profession for 45 years. You've got to have some aggressive enforcement. Otherwise, you're going to continue to have some of the problems that you see in Chicago and of course DC, where you have our folks killing each other. And so you have to have some effort of some stop and frisk in a proper way within the law to try to cut down on, in this particular case, gun violence. The other thing is that one of the things I didn't bring up, we have, because of the border situation, we have a ton of fentanyl and methamphetamine coming into the United States. And marijuana is one thing because it's legal in California, but these other drugs are not legal in most states. And there's an area where we're losing a generation of our young people based upon the influx of drugs. We're seeing more of an influx of drugs than we ever have in many, many years. And one of the things about the defunding the police movement is that you have police officers that are afraid of taking any action as police officers. They're just going to go from one call to the next. They're not going to try to root out individuals that we know that are involved in criminal activity because of the fear of prosecution or termination. And there's got to be a balancing act. Here at our academy, we train officers how to be guardians, not warriors. And there's a balancing act because at the same time, they have to be able to get out there and attack crime and take criminals off the street, but at the same time, they have to protect themselves and do it and contact suspects and deal with them in a proper and reasonable way. And I know a lot of the issues we've seen over the past few years, more so than ever before, particularly during the pandemic. Here's a word of advice I tell folks when they ask me about the situation of dealing with the police. In California, particularly in Los Angeles County, if you get contacted by an officer and you feel you're not being treated right, complain. I say comply and complain. But don't resist. Don't resist because it never ends well. And everyone, it's not good for anyone. So that's the final note I'd like to end on. But I am somewhat of a believer in contacting individuals that you know or suspect that have been involved in criminal behavior and contacting them. And most of the officers out there that are doing field interviews, they know who the criminals are. That's the best answer I can give you.
Councilman, we have a lively conversation going on in the chat about people arguing back and forth, disagreeing with you on several points.
Sure.
It would be good for you to read it. We don't have a lot of time left, and I'm gonna give that time to my boss, Sandy Close.
Well, thank you very much. As somebody who ran a community newspaper in Oakland, based in West Oakland in 1975, there are lots of questions I want to ask you, but and whether you knew whether you knew the head of the Black Panther Party when he was a poverty program organizer. And
I know all those guys. Okay. I was there when Huey Newton was there, H. Rap Brown.
This could be the start of a great conversation, but just one last question.
Sure.
Do you think the GOP has a chance of regaining the sway it once had in California? Or do you feel that I think one of the speakers talked about the difficulty of having a single party state. What is the best way the GOP can rebuild trust, establish trust, especially with ethnic Californians?
I think,
and in the wake of Trump.
Yeah, I think continue to outreach to the communities with people of color, and not just coming around when there's election time. One of the things is that, unfortunately, a lot of Republicans are leaving the state. But I'm optimistic. I think that if we continue the grassroots effort that Jessica Patterson has began when she took office, then I think I'm optimistic that we can gain some folks of color into the party.
Okay, thank you. I hate to cut off the start of or wanting to continue this very lively exchange. I want to thank you, the other speakers, above all our media, and Pilar for an excellent job moderating today's briefing. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.